Every house has its secrets, and they're usually hiding in the places we visit the least, that is, basements and attics. Today, you're gonna see just how incredible those secrets can be. Let's go. Apparently, even a legendary World War II weapon like the MP40 can still be found in an abandoned barn somewhere in a German village. This one had simply been lying there, waiting for someone to open the right box. While cleaning out his grandfather's attic, Carl was expecting to find some old junk. Instead, he discovered dozens of extremely rare baseball cards from 1910, each worth several $1,000s and preserved so well it looked as though his grandfather had been deliberately hiding them from collectors for over a century. This rusty short sword and spearhead had been sitting in an attic for 30 years. Then, the owner casually mentioned them to an archaeologist he knew and discovered that the weapons were more than 1,300 years old. A house attic can hold some great relics, but a barn attic can hold legends. Tell us in the comments which of these classic Kawasaki motorcycles you'd take home. This treasure hunter definitely picked the right abandoned house, because waiting for him in the dusty attic were silver coins from Imperial Russia and a gold cross made from 54 zlotnik gold, complete with its chain. This guy only went up to store the Christmas tree and ended up taking a short trip into the past. He found more than 15 gold and silver trophies from cycling championships held in 1970 and 1971, all left behind by the previous resident. This house takes walk-in closets to a completely different level. The wardrobe you see here was never meant for clothes. It concealed a speakeasy, the kind of secret bar that became popular during Prohibition in the United States from 1920 to 1933. The previous owner had set this money aside for a rainy day, but nearly 70 years later, it was finally discovered in the attic of a newly purchased home. Have you always wanted to be filthy rich? Well, then you should probably check your basement. That's where this guy found $10,000 in cash left behind by the previous owner, who had moved out in 1967. He even tracked down the owner and returned part of it. You think this soda from Grandma's basement, straight out of the 1980s, is still safe to drink? Probably best not to find out. During restoration work on a home in the village of Roslyn, workers discovered a nearly 300-year-old Bible in the attic. It had belonged to one of the village's founders and was so well preserved, it looked as though it had spent the entire time in a museum. Nothing to see here, just a rare German Luger P08 semi-automatic pistol that had been lying beneath the roof of this person's barn for years. This thing is a World War I legend that can usually only be seen in museums. This discovery in the guy's grandfather's basement is proving one thing: the old man had excellent taste in watches. 99% of the time, 99% of basements are full of junk that the owner never gets around to throwing away. But for the other 1% though, that junk turns out to be treasure, like these collectible Pokemon figures straight out of 1999. Which one did you wish you had as a kid? Tell us in the comments. When this guy bought a house, he had no idea that the attic would come with a genuine wartime treasure, a Nazi STG-44 assault rifle produced for only 2 years, beginning in 1943. An urban exploration trip turned into a jackpot for these school kids when they found a box in an old basement full of cash, a silver bar, and even gold. That's right, another routine attic cleanup has uncovered an unexpected family inheritance: AK-47 rifles that had been hiding among this family's grandfather's belongings for years. This is what Chinese anti-corruption investigators reportedly found while searching the home of a high-ranking official: 13 tons of gold bars and a staggering amount of cash reportedly worth 30 billion pounds. For years, a sword brought home by an American soldier after World War II sat gathering dust next to some canned food in a Minnesota basement. Then, someone discovered it was around 500 years old and may have once belonged to a Japanese samurai. Take a look at these 500-year-old religious artifacts. For years, they had been mistaken for ordinary Christmas decorations in the attic until someone opened them and discovered human bones. Apparently, no one had gone into this attic since Prohibition because an entire illegal distillery from that era had been quietly hiding directly above residents' heads. I'm willing to bet you've never seen a telephone like this before. I'm also willing to bet that something this special shouldn't be sitting forgotten in an attic. Unwanted neighbors aren't always who you'd expect. The residents of this house found a cache of 6 modern landmines in the attic. 4 were removed first, and then 2 more were discovered several days later. This little piece of cardboard featuring Babe Ruth is worth around $10 million, making it one of the most valuable baseball cards in history. It's also proof that a mother saying, "Throw those old cards in the attic away," could end up costing someone a fortune. This guy's parents had essentially turned their attic into an armory. Over the years, it was filled with enough rifles, handguns, and ammunition to equip a small army. It turns out a wallet can be returned even 46 years after it was lost. Workers found this one in the basement during renovations at the old Majestic Theater in Ventura, California, after which they tracked down its owner with the help of social media. While preparing the Argentine Supreme Court archives for relocation, workers found something unusual. Crates filled with German propaganda documents that had arrived in the country in 1941 from the German embassy in Tokyo. If there were ever a competition for the best basement in a private home, this one would be the obvious winner. It has its own tunnel leading directly to the center of town. It's a great way to avoid traffic. Take a look inside the basement of this century-old house. During Prohibition, it was used to hide alcohol. Behind a metal vault door, the owners found more than 30 jars of moonshine, champagne from the early 1900s, and around 100 bottles of gin. You think they're accepting visitors? While cleaning out the attic, this guy found what looked like an ordinary violin. It turned out to be the instrument owned by Wallace Hartley, the band leader aboard the Titanic. The violin was found strapped to his body and later sold for $1.7 million. I'd be lying if I said this family from Tampa wasn't surprised to find a pirate stash in their attic. It contained antique coins, a mysterious map, a photograph of their ancestors, and even a mummified hand wearing a ring. Someone clearly decided the attic was safer than a bank. Judging by the bag stuffed with bundles of cash that was found up there, maybe they were onto something. For anyone who grew up in the 1990s, this is looking like a real treasure. A Game Boy and an entire mountain of cartridges. Honestly, even today, this collection is enough to make people jealous. When you're finding things like this beneath your house, you start to understand where all those stories about monsters in the basement came from. It took this woman several truckloads to clear away all the junk left behind by the previous owners of this 1942 home. That's when she discovered a safe with 2 locks sealed inside the concrete basement floor, and apparently no one had even known it existed. After spotting one of her aunt's paintings on TV, this woman checked her own attic and discovered more than 500 forgotten works by acclaimed artist Evelyn Dunbar. They had remained untouched for decades after Dunbar's death in 1960. When this man bought a building, he had no idea there was an entire photography archive hidden within, complete with equipment, props, and countless old photographs. Attics really do seem like portals to the past. Every so often, they produce something truly mind-blowing, like this 1824 facsimile of the Declaration of Independence, one of only 52 known to survive today. To reach this box of vintage Rolex watches, one man had to partially tear open the ceiling in his attic, and judging by what he found, it was worth the effort. This is what it looks like to discover a hidden bar in your own basement. The owners restored it so well they were able to reopen it for the first time since the 1920s. The previous owners of this attic seem to have forgotten something important, a pair of early 20th century wedding icons that sat untouched for roughly 100 years and survived everything except being remembered. This old painting gathered dust in a main attic for years until an appraiser confirmed it was an original Rembrandt worth around $1.4 million. Cleaning out a rental house in Midtown nearly ended in disaster when someone found a grenade in the sweltering attic, where it had been sitting for more than 50 years in temperatures approaching 40 degrees Celsius. This jar, containing 300 gold coins from the 5th century, had remained beneath the floor of an old theater in Como since the final days of the Roman Empire. It was only discovered because the building had been scheduled to be demolished for a luxury residential development. When you hear a country house with a cellar, you usually picture potatoes and jars of preserves, not dozens of shells, mines, anti-aircraft missiles, and an actual BTR-80 armored personnel carrier. Tell us in the comments why anyone would keep all that at a country house. What would you do after finding an exact replica of the ancient Egyptian Book of Amun-Ra inside some boxes in the basement, complete with golden tablets? These wooden crates sitting in the basement of Keene University in New Jersey turned out to be more than old antiques. They were holding a collection of wine that was several centuries old, quietly hiding right under students' feet. Workers arrived to perform routine repairs at a church along the River Thames and ended up uncovering an entire crypt containing 30 coffins. One of them belonged to a former head of the Church of England who died in 1610. All it took was finding an antique bayonet from an 1876 Gras rifle in the ruined attic of an early 1900s pre-revolutionary house to send this guy down a rabbit hole into the history of that era. Imagine the residents' surprise when some old pipes that had been lying in the basement for years suddenly turned out to be pieces of ballistic missiles from a Topol missile system, all thanks to a few searches online. Had these guys not found a 550-pound World War II aerial bomb inside their home, you might never have learned how many people it takes to carry one down a basement staircase. Don't worry, it had already been defused and was completely safe. Does a toy robot from 1957 really belong in the attic? Well, its owner didn't think so and nearly threw away an extremely rare Japanese Radicon robot worth as much as 10,000 pounds. A cassette labeled Ozzy Last Day had been sitting in someone's attic for 46 years. It turned out to contain a recording of Ozzy Osbourne rehearsing with Randy Rhoads shortly after Ozzy had been kicked out of Black Sabbath. The basement of this abandoned house had turned into a real time capsule, complete with vinyl records, a punching bag, golf clubs, personal belongings, and even mushrooms that had apparently decided the house belonged to them now. It looks like an ordinary apartment, right? Except this guy's basement has a creepy passage leading down into actual catacombs, complete with their own railroad. Now, take a look at this pirate chest. Finding an antique chest like this in the attic is already an incredible stroke of luck, even when there isn't any treasure hiding inside. This attic discovery was filled to the brim with someone's stories and memories, all preserved in photographs, newspaper clippings, and letters dating back to 1924. I have far more questions than answers about what's going on in this basement. Somehow, the strangest part is that this video wasn't even filmed inside a medieval castle. Judging by what was inside this box, its owner had been a serious collector, spending years gathering coins from all over the world. This small French house once belonged to a man who apparently preferred animals over people. It's still holding on to his one-legged father's prosthetic limbs, antique furniture, and plenty of cobwebs. This is a copy of the first Superman comic, worth $9 million. These brothers found it by accident while clearing out an old attic, having no idea they were about to uncover one of the rarest and most valuable comics in history. Believe it or not, these guys made this discovery using a metal detector in the attic. Imagine buying a house and finding this many suitcases sitting in the dusty attic. The new owner's probably praying to every god he knows that they're all stuffed with cash. Abandoned hospitals rarely leave you with a good feeling, especially when the basement is still holding a disturbingly well-preserved room from the building's former morgue. Anyone who knows how valuable sports cards can be in the collecting world can probably imagine what kind of treasure this guy was finding in his attic. If your basement doesn't have an archaeological collection complete with turtle shells, don't even bother inviting me over. Finding something mysterious inside your own home is already pretty cool. Finding something you made with your own hands 20 years earlier is even better. He opened a box in the basement and found a 200-year-old book. Then he opened the book and found another book hiding inside. At this point, there could easily be another one inside that one too. It's all books all the way down. This elderly man's grandfather had served during World War I and held onto a huge collection of artifacts from the conflict, gradually turning the attic into a miniature history museum. How well do you really know your neighbors? The residents of Hales Corners thought they knew theirs pretty well until one neighbor died and authorities found 15 grenades, an anti-tank weapon, a mortar shell, and 15 signal flares inside his basement. For 3 years, this filing cabinet had been sitting in the basement with $987 in cash hidden inside, just waiting for the owner to finally decide it was time to clean up. Imagine living in a 200-year-old house for several years without realizing there had been a secret room hiding beneath one of the basement walls the entire time. Take a look at this massive safe. What do you think they were keeping inside? And how many people did it take to get this thing down the basement stairs? I can't be sure, but all this Barbie stuff looks like it came from around the same time as Grandma's soda. Where else was a retiree living in a private home supposed to keep 4 fragmentation grenades? Right next to the jar of pickles, obviously. You'd think it would be difficult to discover anything new inside a 140-year-old Victorian house, but these residents managed to do exactly that. When this guy bought the house, the previous owner gave him a ring of keys, including one that didn't seem to belong to anything. At least that's what he thought, until he found an old safe hidden inside the basement wall. After discovering dozens of Barbie dolls and other toys in the attic, this woman finally realized her childhood had been a lot more luxurious than her parents had let on. This guy may never have known that his great-grandfather was a World War II hero if he hadn't come across this discovery in the attic. This guy thought he had come up with the perfect hiding place until he discovered that the previous homeowner had beaten him to it by about 10 years. No one had checked this basement in 10 years, and it had been holding on to a small surprise. A stack of old comic books that still looked as though they had just come off the store shelf. Renovating a house is one way to learn a lot more about what's been hiding in your attic. You'd have to be incredibly brave to walk up to something like this on purpose in an abandoned basement. Some people spend years dreaming of receiving even one little Tiffany box. This guy's mother had been sending them straight to the attic every year without even opening them. Someone should probably start moving anyone who grew up in the 1990s away from the screen, because this collection is going to make them unbearably jealous. It's hard to believe that only a few years ago, this lost Caravaggio masterpiece, valued at up to $170 million, had been quietly gathering dust in the attic of a home in Toulouse. Experts later confirmed it was an original that had been missing for more than 400 years. This discovery beneath the basement of a London office building turned out to be one of the most important pieces of evidence from the city's Roman past. It was part of the ancient city's first basilica, built more than 2,000 years ago. You can probably guess where this extremely rare 18th century Chinese imperial vase was discovered. Worth 16.2 million euro, it had been sitting inside a box among ordinary household items in an old attic for decades. Well, there you have it. We found another grandmother who trusted a jar in the attic more than she trusted a bank. An old box in the attic turned out to be something much more special. Inside were hundreds of handwritten love letters that this person's grandparents had exchanged while one of them was serving on the front lines during World War II. While some homeowners are turning their basements into bars, these owners decided to go in a completely different direction and built an entire library down there. As you can see, you don't need to find a multi-million-dollar painting in the attic to be genuinely thrilled with what you've discovered. Believe it or not, someone bought this collectible Mary Poppins plate in 1989, put it in the attic, and apparently never touched it again until it was rediscovered. This movie projector had been sitting in the basement for so long that no one could even remember what was recorded on the film reels beside it. Eventually, someone finally decided to watch them. And this is what happens when old phones aren't sold or thrown away, and instead keep getting tossed into a box in the basement. Imagine what would have happened if these documents from the attic hadn't reached an expert in time. Lost writings by Alan Turing, the father of modern computing, worth more than $627,000, were just moments away from being fed into a shredder. You know what's so great about this discovery? After spending 40 years in the attic, these Star Wars toys have somehow only gotten cooler. Finding 18th and 19th century Okinawan artwork that had been stolen during World War II in someone's attic is already a surprise. The fact that the FBI were the ones who found it makes the story even stranger. Okay, honest answers only in the comments. What kind of sticker collection did you have as a kid? Whatever is still hiding in the basements of Pripyat is probably best admired from a very safe distance. A school basement is probably the wildest place to stumble upon 3 anti-tank mines. And finding an unidentified handgun in your own basement? That's just creepy. Mary Ellen Rixey passed away at the age of 89. Only then, while clearing out her attic, did her family uncover the secret life that she had lived when she was young. She had once been the face and lead model of the famous clothing brand Nellie Dawn. No one knows exactly how many decades this 140-year-old tin cornice had been down in the basement, but now it's finally being restored and returned to an interior where it can be appreciated again. Judging by the fact that someone hid this painting in the attic floor, it was probably just as creepy 100 years ago as it is today. This is what one woman's 76-year-old mother had been secretly collecting. Hundreds of toys the rest of the family knew nothing about until they finally went downstairs. A manuscript written by this man's great-grandfather, a surgeon during the American Civil War, had been sitting in the attic for more than 150 years. After discovering it, the great-grandson published the unique eyewitness account. You can find almost anything while exploring an old house, including a complete soldier's kit from another era with everything he would have needed for service.
Скоріше всього, що трофейна.
Sometimes, attics really feel like stepping back in time. That's exactly what happened in Limerick, where someone discovered a massive archive of documents telling the stories of entire generations. It took one trip into the basement to discover that someone in this family had apparently been a real rock star in their younger years. Even if you've seen dozens of antique sewing machines, this mysterious model from someone's attic is still gonna catch you off guard. The best testament to the durability of Apple's products isn't a commercial. It's this computer from 1983 that had been sitting in an attic for 3 decades and was still able to turn on. There must be something strange and special about finding an old typewriter that's been quietly passing from one generation of your family to the next. Why do you think someone would haul an entire vending machine into the basement? What started as a routine basement check turned into a historical mystery when a World War II-era letter was discovered inside the wall. No one has been able to determine exactly where it came from. A homeowner had been told there might be a hidden basement beneath the floor of his 200-year-old house. No one was expecting it to contain an entire stash of alcohol from the 19th century. Try to imagine being the person who accidentally discovered all these shells and mines sitting in the attic of an apartment building. When the new owner bought this old pub, he had no idea he would get a secret tunnel beneath the building as part of the deal. Inside was an abandoned railway passage once used to transport slate from one of the largest quarries in the world. What you're seeing here is normally what's used for blasting rock apart in quarries, not something anyone should be finding in an attic. Pure uranium isn't something you want to see on a sign during a basement cleanup, but that's exactly what this couple found among the belongings of a physicist who had passed away. While renovating a wine cellar, this guy wasn't finding old bottles. He was uncovering dozens of mammoth bones dating back as far as 40,000 years. They probably don't taste as good as the wine would, though. Most people find old boxes and junk in their attics, but this couple from Florida found 2 rockets instead, turning an ordinary cleanup into an unexpected visit from the police and bomb squad. For years, the owner had no idea that a 19th century soldier's gravestone was lying beneath a thick layer of dirt on the basement floor, built directly into the foundation of the house. These are the remains of a Canaanite palace in Tel Kabri, Israel. Inside its wine cellar, archaeologists discovered around 40 13-gallon jars containing traces of wine that had been sitting there for roughly 3,700 years. This one here isn't your everyday discovery. It's a piece of history that had been waiting for decades to finally end up in this person's hands. When this couple happened upon a mask, they had no idea they were looking at an extremely rare artifact from Gabon. They sold it for just $158, only to learn that it later resold for an incredible $4.4 million. Be honest, would you risk taking a couple of bottles from the cellar of an abandoned castle? It really does seem like basements and attics are the first places treasure hunters should be looking for forgotten relics. Imagine finding a telescope like this in the attic, only to realize as you're putting it together that it's actually a sniper rifle. Sometimes a family's real history isn't in the photo album. It's actually hiding right under their feet in the basement. you may very well be looking at someone's entire life packed away in a basement, stored there in the hope that they would return after the hard times were over, but that time never came. Does anyone know how long tea stays good? This guy found an unopened package, but there's just one small problem. It dates all the way back to the Russian Empire. Considering how difficult it was to squeeze into this basement, this person definitely earned whatever they ended up finding down there. Renovations in this house took an unexpected turn when workers found a frag grenade wedged between the pipes in the basement. This man's curiosity clearly overpowered his common sense because he spent several hours forcing open a safe only to find three sisters from St. Louis Park were simply revisiting places from their childhood when their trip down memory lane led them to their mother's wedding dress. They hadn't been looking for it, but they're definitely never gonna forget finding it. Well, that's all for now, but as soon as something else worth seeing turns up in a basement or attic, we'll be making a part 2. In the meantime, tell us in the comments about the strangest thing you've ever found in a place like this. See you next time.